Hello everyone and welcome back to our lesson um, using Go and PostgreSQL. So in the last video we talked about having to create a global variable so that our database connection could be seen by our controllers, by our handlers, sorry, um, that are in their own file. Okay, so um, I also mentioned that using global variables is not necessarily the best approach, especially when you have multiple things that you want the handlers to see or to have access to. Okay, and so we want to have a better solution whereby we can solve this dependency problem. Okay, so whenever I say things, okay, I mean dependencies. Okay, so in the literature, in books, you won't hear them writing. You won't see something written as uh, the database connection variable or the database connection thing. You will hear it. You'll see it written as database dependency. Okay, so how do we provide the dependencies to the handlers? Okay, and so I will start by putting this back. Okay, so we're going to take this back and place it where it belongs, which is inside main. Okay, so it's not inside main like it was, and so obviously the handlers will not be able to find it, right? And so you'll see here that db is unknown. So let's fix that. Okay, and so what we're going to do, we will create a type. Okay, so this is a pattern that we use when we want to make available these dependencies, okay, that are in our main .go file. We want them available in other files. So we'll create a type, okay, and so let's call this type application. Okay, seems like a good name. Struct. Okay, and so if you recall, a struct contains fields. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a field called db. Okay, and this field should be of type sql.db. All right. Okay, so again, none of this would be new to you because you are familiar with types, how to use the struct keyword to make a type. So this is the sort of declaration of a type. We're saying that if I make an application, then it should contain a DB field, which is a database connection. Okay, so I have this type. So what I'm going to do, I will come down here. Okay, and let's put it after the close. I will have to create this new type, an instance of my application type. So I'll say app, okay, application. Then of course, the field name is DB, okay, and then I will say that DB will be initialized with this DB, okay. So okay, so if you recall, this DB variable contains our connection. So all I'm going to say is the DB field will be set to the DB variable. Okay. Now, when you create when app is an instance of or application type. However, if I simply use this application here, then I am in essence creating an object that could essentially change. Okay, so um, I don't want multiple instances of app to be created. All right, I only want one instance, and so I will just put an ampersand here. Okay, which simply means that I'm creating this struct that I'm creating. I will say that app will contain its address. Okay, so when I use this app, the compiler will know not to make a copy. It will use that specific instance, and that's why we pass the address. Okay, so whenever I use app, we'll be referring to this specific one, which has this specific database connection. So we're dealing with one database connection via using the app variable. Okay, so we leave this here for now, and then we will have to now tell the handlers how to deal with this type. Okay, so if I come here, right, I will have to somehow tell the handlers or make these handlers, okay, be able to access the field. And so how do I do that? Well, again, you should know about methods. So what I'm going to do is to simply say that my handler functions are methods on the application type. In essence, what I'm saying is these handlers, they belong to this type. Okay, they belong to this type. So if they belong to this type, then it means that this DB will be accessible by them. So I'm going to come here, and if you recall, to make a type, I'm going to say, let's call it A. Okay, we could call it maybe app if we want. Application. Okay. Now, I have to put an asterisk here because I am using the ampersand operator. Okay, so because I'm saying that app is a pointer in essence, right, to an application, then I have to actually specify that home belongs to a pointer to an application. Okay, so it doesn't just belong to an application, that would be a regular object. It belongs to an object, or it belongs to a pointer that points to an application object. I hope that makes sense. All right, similar to when you're doing C++, when you deal with ampersand, when you go into the function definition, you must use the asterisk. All right. So by doing this, I am saying that home, in essence, belongs to the application type. So home is a part of application. Likewise, let's do the same for this next one. Okay. So notice these are no longer handler functions per se, right? They're no longer functions. there are methods. Okay. And then I could, if I read one here. Okay. So all of my functions, my handler functions have in essence become handler methods, okay, on the application type. Okay, so all I'm telling the compiler, home, create quote form, and create quote can be called on an application type. All right, so this is done. And so now we'll come back here and notice what is happening. It's telling me that home, compiler is saying, what is home? Compiler is saying create quote form. What is that? Create quote. What is that? And so the compiler is right because the compiler is expecting that methods should have the type that it's based on. So home by itself is a function, but we have changed home from a function to a method. And so because we have done that, we must specify what is the type. Okay, so we can't just say home, we have to say some type that home. And so what is the type? Well, it's an application, but if you notice, we created an instance of that type. So I'm going to say app.home. And so the compiler knows that, oh, okay, this method home will be called on this variable app because this variable app is an instance of the application type. Likewise, I'm going to say app.createForm and app.createQuote. Okay, so that takes care of our errors. Okay, and notice everything is set up. So now let's come back here to our handler and let's look at our DB instance. Okay, so here it's telling me that DB is undeclared. All right, and so let's go back. All right, and so you may be asking, well, why is it telling me that DB is undeclared? Well, think about it. App in essence is pointing, so this variable app is sort of our parameter. So just like how we have to use W to do something and R to do something, right? We can't just say method, we can't just say method post. We have to say R that method or R that post form. Likewise, this is the parameter name app, which is an instance of an application. And as you know, an application contains a DB field. And so if I come down here, the compiler is asking, what is DB? I don't know. But if I say, okay, compiler, I mean app, and inside app, of course, because it's an application instance, there is a field called DB. And so I'll say that. Okay, so app.db.execute. So this app is just saying the type, and then DB is telling us which field, and then since it's a DB, since it's a connection, database connection, we know that it has an execution function. All right, so the only thing I did was to sort of, what's that word, use a qualifier. The qualifying name is app. Okay, so again, if I just do DB, DB has no context. What is DB? But if I say app.db, Now the compiler knows, okay, he's talking about this, which is an application, a pointer to an application. And so when I go and look for an application, I know an application will have a DB field. And since I initialized our DB field with the DB database connection that we created, okay, so again, we had to create a DB to contain our DB connection, the database connection, and we pass that in, and so I can now use that DB here. Okay, so that should make sense because you are familiar with using struct to make a type, right? So you're familiar with methods, and of course, since you've done extensive programming in C++, you know about the idea of parameters and using those. So you can think of this app like a parameter, right? Okay. All right, so let's save this and let's see if we can get it to run. So I'm going to say go run this directory. Okay, and we should get the program should run exactly the same. All right, should run exactly the same. All right, let's start new. 4,000. Okay, and then let's just do quote. All right, and then let's add let's say allow. So and maybe life, and maybe say be happy. All right, let's submit. All right, and so we could verify by checking our database, and then we have be happy. So again, this is a pattern that we use a lot, and so the idea is this: we don't want to use global variables to specify or to make these dependencies available. Okay, so we don't want to make our dependencies available via global variables. So the way we make our dependencies available, okay, dependencies available is by passing them to our handlers. So notice I am passing the DB database connection to my create quote handler via this app variable name. Okay, so I am passing the dependency to the create quote handler. Okay, so again, this is one pattern of how to not use global variables to pass the dependencies that our handlers need. Okay, so we're passing dependencies. We're passing the database connection, which is our only dependency, to the handlers. Now I'm going to do one last thing, and I'm going to change some just things or variables, and I'm going to give the general name dependency injection, which I'm going to quote as passing. So in books, in your courses that you're taking right now, you will hear it being spoken as dependency injection. Okay, so that's just a name, but the idea is you want to make the things that we would normally expose as global variables, have them isolated in such a way that we're able to give access to them using a type. Okay, in this case, we created a type called application, and we wrapped the DB connection. Right, so we wrapped the DB connection, and that way, DB is no longer a global variable. Okay, and so because it's no longer a global variable, we have to actually create methods on this type to make whichever handler needs access to DB to gain access to DB. Now, notice I went ahead and I made all the handlers be methods, even though in reality only the last one needed DB. Okay, but later on, your other methods will also need access to DB, or even if they don't, it still makes sense that you make it uniform, whereby you say if one of them is a method, let's make all of them method. All right. And the final piece of information, because we are now using this dependency injection pattern, right? Notice it's a pattern. And the pattern is when you need to pass these dependencies, this is what you do. And so because we're doing dependency injection, we have to now specify not only the name of the function, the handler, we have to specify which type it belongs to. And in our case, we're using app.home because app is just an instance of the application type. All right, so that's quite a bit, and that's the reason why I will leave this video here right now. We'll stop here because I want you to wrap your head around the idea of dependency injection, which is just another way of saying dependency passing, which simply means a way to make the dependencies available without making them global variables. And again, the word dependency simply means variables that your handlers or any other part of your program needs to do its job. Without a database connection, then the handlers cannot do their job, meaning they cannot connect to the database, they cannot write to the database, they cannot read from the database. And so all we're really doing is finding a way to make the database connection and any other thing that is needed available without it being or without them being global variables. Okay, so I will leave it here, and I fully expect that you will run the code, change the code, try to break it so that you get a better understanding. And I'll see you in the next video.